Okay, this is Gary Scudder, professor in the Corps, and today, with ably assisted by the excellent Dr. Pepin, I will be filming and discussing a project, an assignment that I use in Corps 220, aesthetic expressions. I think it also could be used in Corps 110, or at least could be adapted for Corps 110. And maybe Heroines and Heroes, but I think it really fits in very well with 220. This is a project that I call the Velazquez Picasso project. The origins of this go back, I don't know how many years ago, 8 years ago or something. I was in a museum in Barcelona, and they had a great exhibit walking you through one of Picasso's projects. And I'm not really that big of a Picasso fan, but occasionally he'll say something and I'll just go, okay, you're a genius, I'll grant you that. And what he was talking about specifically was his adaptation of a famous painting by the Spanish painter Velazquez. So we'll turn here to the screen. Okay. Picasso's point was, he was talking about painting and talking about doing paintings that were an homage to a great painter or a modern version of it. And he started talking about the very, very famous Velazquez painting of the Spanish royal family that all the students know. Everybody knows this painting even if you don't even know the name of it. It's sort of like one of the classic paintings. And Picasso's argument was that if he was going to do a remake of this, it would literally change day to day, almost hour to hour, based upon what mood he was in and which way the wind was blowing. So he ended up doing 53 different versions of this painting, which I think is really fascinating. So everyone knows this painting, Velazquez. Here he actually is, I'll move Monkey out of the way here. Here he is sitting here painting, looking back at himself, members of the Spanish royal family. And as I always do, I'm the king of all PowerPoints. I'm very happy to loan this PowerPoint out to anybody who would like to do it. And I'll show you some examples of this. I found this great slide which breaks down the main characters in the famous Velazquez painting. Characters in the back, like you've got the Spanish, you've got the King and Queen of Spain in the back, reflected in classic Renaissance fashion back here in the mirror. You've got a Spanish nobleman here, you've got a dwarf, you've got the painter himself, you've got the princess, you've got a dog. So the classic Franks. The reason we do this is that once you see those, then you're going to be able to pick out the corresponding figures in all of the different Picasso versions. And also something you could talk about in regards to having the students think back to what they learned about perception and memory from the Pumpkin book, from concepts of the self. So again, here is, I'll go back real quick, again, here's the famous Spanish version from Velazquez. And now here are a few of the many versions that Picasso did. And what's nice about, in regards to making the students go back and think about its relationship to perception and memory, is that simply because you now know the Velazquez painting, you can now begin to impose a narrative on it. This is also something that Freeland talks about in the Concepts of the Self art book. So suddenly you get, here's Velazquez over here, here is the Spanish princess, here's the dwarf, here's the dog, the nobleman, the king and queen reflected here in the back. Again, nice comparison of the two, and you can sort of pick it out. But see, this is only one of many versions of this, and Picasso's point again being that it would change dramatically depending on what day of the week it was. And there were many ways to essentially represent the same concept. Here's another one. Again, there are literally over 50 different versions of this. Again, here is Velazquez. Here you can sort of almost pick him out. Here is the Infanta, the dwarf, the dog. Another one, they get more and more abstract as time goes by. The dog. Velazquez essentially just almost disappears in this one. You've got the nobleman. You sort of hint at the reflection of the king and queen, but you don't actually show them. You've got the Infanta here. Another even stranger version of it, though at least here you get the king and queen reflected. Velazquez has once again disappeared from the painting. what's amazing is you can almost do one of those memory games where you'd almost say this and ask the students, okay, where exactly is Velazquez in this painting? Because they expect Velazquez to be in there, would probably place Velazquez in there in their memory. So there's all sorts of stuff you could do with this. This is why I think you could probably do it in 110 as well. Here's another one, and you could go on and on and on with this. This is one of my favorite ones. When I was in Barcelona looking at this, I had this thought, and I thought, one, this is really an amazing concept of series of paintings. And I began to think, what you could really make a very cool assignment based on this concept. Why don't you ask the students to do almost exactly the same thing? Essentially create a painting. So, there's a close-up of the Infanta in one of the paintings. So my idea was, and this is something I use in aesthetic expression, is I asked the students to take a work of art and then transform it into another work of art. And so what happens is it becomes almost a 3-part assignment. Explain why you chose a particular work of art. And more importantly, explain why it fits in the aesthetic window, in the worldview of that age. And then transform it into another work of art. But it must fit into the aesthetic worldview of that new age. So for instance, if you're going to do a Renaissance portrait, and you want to turn it into, say, a Chinese work of art, then it becomes much harder, because in a classic Chinese work of art, you are not going to be able to focus on one individual, because that's not what the Chinese did. Unless, of course, that one individual tends to be the emperor or his wife or his concubine. So you're never going to celebrate the individual person. So you can't just say, okay, here's a portrait of Benvenuto Cellini, and now suddenly here he is in China. You would not have the same thing. You could not make that argument. And then the third part of the paper is essentially what's your thought process in making that transformation. Now, it takes a little work to do, because you have to give them the tools to do it. So even though aesthetic expression is basically a Western course that is taught in the second year, I devote times to the Chinese aesthetic and the Indian aesthetic and the Arabic aesthetic, and I think even there's several I've done over the years, but I think also I did the African aesthetic. So you give them some foundational information. And the only rule I give is that either the work that they started with or the work that they transform it into has to be Western. But that's it. So even if it's Western to Western, it has to be a different age. My experience with this is that really bright students eat this up, because they just totally get it. They understand what the hell they're trying to do. Students who are not quite as bright really struggle with this immeasurably. So if you're thinking about tools which really separate out the different kinds of students, this is a very good one. Anyway, so I've had a lot of success with this. If anyone ever wants to borrow this, let me know. Again, thank you very much.